Nothing better on a snow day than to talk to one of my favorite people on earth. One of the smartest people I know, Chip Patterson, CBSSports.com, Cover 3 podcast moderator. There's not enough snow for you. Last time we did this on a snow day, you had already had some snow time. Not enough snow for you to do anything, is it? Is there, Chip?
No, we're not sticking to the roads just yet. It's making for a nice scene. The boys already have the bowl out to see if we can make some snow cream out of it. So that's the first accumulation task, and then we'll see what we can get on the road.
I'm gonna just move past the snow cream thing, but that's fine. It is lovely. It looks like a little snow globe-ish out here in Oxford, America, USA. So last week, Ross Dellinger from Yahoo wrote the story, and everybody has had their opinions about the next wave of the college football playoff, which will likely be an expansion to either 14 or 16 teams. And I wonder if we should even start maybe at the beginning of this when the conference is pushed back. The conference is not named the SEC, pushed back. And Greg Sankey said, take this deal now or basically we're going to bend you over a barrel at the next negotiation. And everybody basically went, yeah, whatever. Is the SEC and the Big Ten going to do that now? Are we really going to divide guarantee slots up for everybody and completely destroy any notion of an actual tournament here?
Well, I mean, you've loaded that up for me, Adam.
I have very little respect for what I think we're about to head towards.
I would not. There's another perspective that is coming out of some corners of the ACC, that is coming out of some corners of the Big 12, that is at least a perspective that I think should be shared. It is that there has been so much frustration with the absence of leadership within college athletics, but specifically college football. And we've spent so much time in this, no bad ideas world where every private entity and private equity and think tank has a slideshow. And we're doing all these meetings in hotel conference rooms with all these ideas of what it would be. But there isn't any sole direction. And the perspective that I think is sort of at least gotten my attention is from those who say, yeah, we are giving up some power. Yeah, we are giving up some decision-making leverage. But at least somebody is going to take this sport in a direction. At least this SEC Big Ten power grab will result in college football not just spinning its wheels and getting locked in bureaucratic gridlock. And so, if you are one of those ACC or Big 12 schools that is not coveted by the Big Ten or the SEC, if you're one of those ACC or Big 12 schools that, would like to be a part of college football at the highest level, but understand that you don't necessarily have all the cards, then having 2 guaranteed spots into the college football playoff, but maybe even more importantly, having a consolidation of decision-making is not necessarily a bad thing. Whether the validity of the tournament, any gripes about what it does in terms of giving up power, or whether there would be years where the ACC would have 3 valuable teams and be squeezed out for a 4th team from the Big Ten who might not be as valuable or as worthy. Those are all fair. But I think that it has been interesting to hear from some of those, from some of those schools and those institutions, not necessarily at the top of power conferences, that are, they got all kinds of concerns right now. A university president at a middle-of-the-pack ACC school is probably more concerned about the enrollment cliff of 2026 than they are about the future of the college football playoff, and they're probably just glad that somebody else is going to move this thing ahead.
Chip Patterson is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. See, to me, all of that is rationalization for a system that, I mean, I just don't get guaranteing anything. Like, I can understand guaranteed spots for conference champs. I'm not even married to that, but I can understand that. I don't see guaranteeing a spot for anybody who's in second place or third place or fourth. I just don't understand. For the life of me, I can't wrap my mind or
the Champions League is on right now. Exactly how the Champions League works.
No, if we're talking about professional sports, I'm okay. Like, let professional sports do what professional sports is supposed to do. Now, and you've heard me say this before, because I believe that we are headed that way with college athletics. I 100% believe that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to engulf more schools down the road, and maybe they'll be called the SEC and the Big Ten at that point. And we'll have 40 to 60 teams, and they will operate essentially as a professional league. That's fine. If we go there, that's cool. But in the current system that we use, like, there shouldn't be these guarantees. We should have a tournament and let the 14 best or 16 best or 24 best teams let them play. I thought the SEC played the greatest football that has ever been known to this earth. Why do they need any guarantees? I mean, to be honest, allowing the Big Ten 4 guarantees might not be good business for the SEC. This is the part of it, on top of the fact that, because to me it's not even about successful football. It's about showing who's boss. And I don't know, maybe I'm jaded for other things going on, but I am appalled that Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark haven't basically told Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti to go kick rocks. You want to do your own thing, go do your own thing, but that's money, and the presidents are probably pushing them from the other side.
Yeah, so here, let me at least throw a couple other sides of this. That, and again, let me state for any new listeners on this unprecedented statewide platform that I care about the playoff. I do not love college football because of the playoff. That I think college football is at its best in October and November, and that what happens on fall Saturdays is the soul of the sport. And the more that the sport gets driven into playoff matters and nothing else does, it is losing what has millions of people tuning in for America's second most popular sport. Okay, that said, that qualifies.
Yep, you and I agree on that.
I think that eliminating the role of the committee is not a bad thing. I think that it is a way that you have heightened conference championship races, and you have even as conferences are no longer regional, you have somewhat regionalized the college football playoff race, and you have put in safeguards to prevent, a final bracket that is not a national product. Those are things I can get behind. The fact that, the conference play is something that is going to matter, and that we're not putting everything in the hands of the selection committee, because in the 4-4-2-2-1-1 hike model,
right,
you have very much neutered the selection committee, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, especially as the bracket begins to increase, because when we increased from 4 to 12, I wrote it at the time and I stand by it. It is so much harder to decide between those imperfect candidates for the final at-large bid than it was to decide between 4 and 5 in the 4-team model. And so the less pressure that we put on the committee for, selecting making those final spots, I think that that's probably not a bad thing, especially for, fans of the sport. It was so confusing for college football casuals to watch on Tuesday nights, see a 1 through 25 revealed, then see a bracket put on the screen that did not match at all the 1 through 25, and have the seeds not match the ranks, and all these other things. Like, I think that it is creating all right, who are going to be the top 4 teams in the Big Ten? Who are going to be the top 4 teams in the SEC? Who are going to be the teams in the ACC that make those, that get those spots? Those competitions, I think, are a little bit closer towards the regionalized nature of college football with a focus on the regular season.
Well, regionalization of the game would really be a throwback, right? It used to be.
Well, that's why it's not truly regional. The conferences aren't regional, so it's not regionalized
not anymore.
In terms of the map, but it is regionalized at least in terms of the conversation, where the competition is among you and your conference peers.
Chip Patterson is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. You mentioned at the top of that really the thing that bothers me the most about this entire thing, and that's the people who are in charge, and I really should say the person who is in charge, and that's Greg Sankey of the SEC, and to an extent Tony Petitti of the Big Ten, because ultimately they've got the biggest purse strings, that we have really completely lost the plot when it comes to college football. And because you pointed it out, the Saturdays in late September, October, early November, which are the lifeblood of the sport and really what gives what everybody loves so much about it. I mean, that they're killing it because none of it has anything to do with what happens. I mean, indirectly it does, but the only thing that people focus on is money and the money that a playoff can give them. And I think we have completely lost it. But again, that's pro sports. And if we want to go that route, which I think we are, then we might as well get there. Let me ask you about a 9-game schedule. I know the SEC probably ends up at a 9-game schedule. Does it make sense for the SEC, for the ACC to go to a 9-game conference schedule?
100%. Endorsed it enthusiastically. Would love a 10-game schedule. I think that...
Yeah, honestly, they might have to.
Yeah, I just think that having these long gaps, the lack of frequency with which you see everyone as a player, like if your pitch to a college football prospect is come play in the ACC, but then your schedule just has you playing at Stanford, Cal, and Boston College, you're not giving them those big college football environments. You need to be able to have as many games against the programs that care, invest in, and compete in college football at the highest levels. It's good for everybody to be able to have as many of those as possible. And so rotating through the conference, if the conferences are going to get bigger, the conference schedule should get bigger for the experience of the players. Also, then this is the second big piece for me, is the balance of the schedule. Because each of the last 2 years, as the ACC has grown, we have had one team in the ACC championship game that they went out there and they played a pretty tough schedule, and they took care of who they needed to take care of. And then we've also had a team that had an advantageous strength of schedule. That when we sat there in July, we were like, okay, I don't think that Louisville in 2023, SMU in 2024, I don't think they're the best team on paper, but I'll tell you what, the schedule that they have, they could get there to Charlotte. And each of those times they did, and a credit to Jeff Brom and a credit to Rhett Lashley and what they did, and especially for the Mustangs going 8-0 against that schedule. But it shouldn't be especially if we're going to have, two automatic bids for the college football playoff. You shouldn't get a fast pass just based on the fact that this is your year to avoid all the teams that are good. So for me, the expansion of the conference schedule is so important because it also creates more balance to the schedules. I mean, the logjam that we had in the SEC this past year with all those different scenarios and all those different teams that could make it to Atlanta, that would have been helped if they'd had 9 games instead of 8. It's just, it to me makes so much sense from the experience of the players, but then also for a little bit more balance when we're looking at the conference standings.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this before, and I want to move on. I would actually make the schedule without thoughts about fairness at all. I would make the best television schedule I could make. If I were Jim Phillips, I would say, all right, get my best football people together, which means I would call you, Chip Patterson, and say, all right, who are our best teams? Let's make sure they play each other as much as possible over the course of the season. And I'm sorry if the schedules aren't balanced. We'll deal with the fallout from that. But I'm going to get as many good games on television as I can. And that's what I would do. I would schedule for inventory purposes more than I would for fairness. I wouldn't care about fairness. I've always said this about college sports. The good teams, they're going to win their share of games regardless. They'll figure it out. The really good teams will figure it out. And if you're not that good, you probably won't have a good record. I think SMU was good. And I think they, like Indiana, was good, even though they didn't play anybody, right? Right. They had one good game during the regular season, or maybe 2. Lost to Ohio State, and who was it that they beat? Michigan, right? So they played two good teams, went 1-1, beat the crap out of everybody else. I mean, incredibly well. And nobody's saying they weren't a good team. A good team. So they got ultimately where they deserved, but I would just as soon have the best teams play each other more often. You wrote this week, Chip Patterson, about the portal. Now, you had told us a few weeks ago that you had seen less talent in the transfer portal this time around than you had in the past. So walk me through the winners, if there are any real winners out of the transfer portal, if you could.
Well, I think that the winner is college football, because what I did is I sat down and I looked at all of the transfer portal activity from the last 3 seasons, and I saw that the number of players that were in every single portal class went up from 2022 to 2023, and then even from 2023 to 2024. That an average portal class at the power conference level is about, like 10 or 11 guys. But the number of classes that they had of 20-plus players, which just increased both years. And I was like, man, well, this obviously isn't something that can lead to success, right? Wrong. Because SMU has been one of the most frequent portal activity teams since Rhett Lashley got there. And as we were just saying, they had a good football team. They were ACC runner-up. They made the college football playoff. Indiana had 31 players. I mean, they made the college football playoff. Colorado has sort of been the face of this. They've had 93 players taken from the portal in the cycles of the 2023 and 2024 season. Then look, they finished tied for first in the Big 12 standings. But I went back to the national championship game, and Ohio State has taken 20 total over the last 3 years. Notre Dame, 20 total transfers over the last 3 years combined. Penn State, like Ohio State and Notre Dame, single-digit transfers taken every single year. And so what would you rather be? Would you rather be a one-and-done? Would you rather be a comet in the sky? Because right now, and I'll throw Georgia. Georgia got up to 11 this past year, but every other year, and also looking at what they've done so far in 2025, single digits. Alabama took on more after the retirement of Nick Saban, but every other year and this year, single digits. My big takeaway was that if you're a first-year coach or if you're in your second year and you just need to just fill the roster, then yeah, go sign one of those 20-plus portal classes. I get it. That can get you the quick fix. But if you want to win a national championship, then you need to be able to build this the old school way. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is something that is encouraging, because stacking recruiting classes on top of recruiting classes is how you build cohesion. That's how you build competitive depth. I know it sounds crazy, but these guys aren't robots. They are 18 to 22-year-olds, and on an offensive line, you've got to go out there and you've got to work together. I mean, Adam, have you ever thought about how dumb football is? We ask 11 guys to all do their job at the same time. I mean, think about your workplace. How many times do 11 people all do their jobs just right and on time? It's ridiculous. And it just gets back to the origins core of football as a sport. You need some of these players to spend time together so that under high-pressure situations, they can go out and do this all on time together. And so that was something that sort of stood out to me. Like, look, I understand. You just got hired. Your roster got gutted. Yep. Like, you need to go out there. That's fine. You can win double-digit games. You can make the college football playoff. But if you want to win multiple games against the best teams in the country in the college football playoff, which is what it takes to win the national championship, understand that those other teams, they've been playing together for a long time. They don't have that kind of roster turnover. They've been recruiting at a high level. They've been developing.
Here's the thing about it for me, because it isn't even about competing for a national championship. Because really, we're talking about a handful of schools every year. Because I think, and I've said this in the context of NC State basketball, in the context of UNC basketball, to me, the foundation must be in recruiting high schools, building a roster, building continuity there, and enhancing through the portal, filling in the gaps in the transfer portal. And I think this goes across the two major sports, whether it's football or men's basketball, women's basketball too, for that matter, that you want to build the roster from the ground up, from your freshman recruiting, your high school recruiting, and have that as your foundation. I think in terms of hoops, I think that's primarily where UNC has gone wrong. Not that, Ian Jackson and Drake Powell aren't wonderful players. They are. They're just two guys, and they have had varying impacts over the course of the season. Meanwhile, up the road, Duke's recruiting guys who are going to the NBA next year. Maybe three of them. And to me, that is the biggest difference between, the way Carolina's trying to do it and the way Duke is doing it. And I think that speaks to both sports. And maybe this is a good sign that we're going to start seeing more continuity within rosters.
Right. And some of this, and this is something else I put in the piece, the House settlement, putting millions and millions of dollars into the roster building war chest of everyone, is going to lead to better roster retention. And that's what I saw, because then I started to study 2025. And those numbers aren't final. We are still going to have a spring transfer portal. And there are schools looking to spend in the spring portal that will create more disruption. But we are starting to see it tick back the other way. 2024 was probably the peak in terms of the number of players in the portal, the number of quality players in the portal, and the sizes of portal classes that we had at the power conference level. Now we're starting to tick back the other way. And I think that's because a lot of these schools now have the money to hold on to their players instead of getting poached.
I appreciate you bringing up Champions League just in the beginning of this conversation. So we'll just close on that. I do.
I mean, it's funny because I know that between Tom Fernelli and myself, we do have some ball knowers, some footy heads on the Cover 3 podcast, but our live audience, the Cover 3 tailgate, when we're talking about this, almost every single time that we talk about the 4-4-2-2-1-1 hike, it's someone says, look, guys, this is very similar to Champions League. You just focus on your own table, your own competition, finish in one of these spots, and you get to go to the big dance.
I have said that the more I've gotten involved and deeply into following the Premier League and European soccer, the more it appeals to me to be very, very similar to college sports at the highest level. I think it's the biggest comparison and you and I could maybe we'll do an entire show on where the similarities are. I don't know. Maybe you and I just have a beer and talk about it, and that would be also preferred on my end. Chip Patterson, as always, the best. At Chip_Patterson, CBSSports.com, Cover 3 podcast moderator, or Potterator if I'm pressed for time. Sir, thank you. Enjoy the snow.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.